Interested in investigation and security? Whether you are already a professional or you are in the beginning stages, take all of your classes at the National Investigative Training Academy. Choose from over 200 courses, all written and taught by experts in the field. The National Investigative Training Academy, or NIDA, has offered high-level investigative and security training for over 12 years. Like live classes, NIDA has those too. Sign up today for private investigation and security courses and use brand ambassador code B as in boy, A as in Adam, 2367. Take a look at investigativeacademy.com. You'll find the link in our show notes. To Crossing the Tape, your favorite true crime podcast. As always, we bring you some, I wouldn't say enjoyable stories, but interesting stories. Yes. Let's put it that way.
Intriguing and lesser known.
Yeah. And we give you a little bit more perspective from investigative standpoints, since we have done that professionally.
Yes.
So we're glad you're here. Please sign the crime scene log and join myself, Hillary, and my husband,
Brendan,
for something a bit different.
Yes. Now, as you may have noticed last time, this month we wanted to bring you some nice, cozy stories to help us transition into the fall season. And therefore, we welcome you to the second installment of what I insist on calling, despite a veto, the Septemberoberries stories.
I knew you would put it in there somewhere.
Now, before we get to today's case, we just wanted to set the tone with a few fun facts about a well-known duo much like ourselves, albeit well-known for very different reasons.
I should hope.
Yes. Now, you're probably familiar with Bonnie and Clyde. Now, that's Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow. They were never married, however, they might as well have been. They were soulmates in every sense of the word, and of course they robbed banks and committed murders together.
But, so, we're soulmates, but we do not do things like that.
No. We do quite the opposite.
Yes.
So, did you know that during his first stint in prison, Clyde cut off 2 of his toes in order to be disqualified from manual labor?
Jeez.
There's a guy who didn't like making an honest living. Honest work wasn't his forte.
And I don't think you can call him lazy if he was willing to do that.
That's the thing. You went to that extent so that you wouldn't have to just go do some... Well, Bonnie, now, despite common perception, she never killed anyone herself or smoked cigars, but she often allowed herself to be photographed waving a gun with a cigar hanging out of her mouth to increase their notoriety.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
When those photos hit the papers, conversations probably went, look at this, a dame with a gun smoking a cigar. Whoever heard of that? And fear spread across the land. I guess that was more taboo back then.
Yeah.
In fact, during the shootout that resulted in their deaths, Bonnie died holding a sandwich, not a gun. Which I never knew.
I didn't know that either.
I guess right before the big shootout, they stopped at a diner, got a to-go order of a BLT and a fried bologna sandwich. Now, I don't know who had what.
I was going to say, what was she holding?
She had one of the sandwiches. I hope it was the fried bologna.
I was going to say the BLT.
Well, I'm sure she was eating light. Interestingly enough, speaking of light, she was 4'11".
Oh, like me.
And Clyde was only 5'4".
Oh, well, that's not like you.
No. A little different.
Yeah.
But they were both...
tiny.
I guess either one of them, it would have been appropriate to have the BLT. A light meal before you get gunned down 10,000 times over.
Yeah.
Also, they carjacked and kidnapped an undertaker who would later be the man to embalm them, ironically.
I bet he had the last laugh.
Yeah. I guess they mentioned to him during the kidnapping, I bet you would enjoy embalming us.
Well, he got to.
And you know what? He did. Obviously, those two are quite famous, but they're no match for the hosts of your favorite podcast. And now, without further ado, those hosts happily bring you the tale of the one-eyed pencil pusher, George Dyer.
Someone I don't know.
Yes, from the same era, a little bit before Bonnie and Clyde.
Okay.
Maybe they heard about his exploits and decided to give it a shot.
You know, it might have had something to do with their height, now that I know that they were little.
They were...
And I can say that because I am 4'11".
Well, yeah, they could have been quick to anger.
Yeah. Hey.
Unlike you.
Thank you.
Now, back to George Dyer. If you found yourself outside of a bank in Montana in the early 1920s, you just might run into a man selling pencils. This poor middle-aged fellow didn't beg for money. He proudly sold his wares to pay his way, even though he had obviously fallen on hard times. But why peddle pencils outside a bank? Well, naturally, he chose that spot because he is a liar.
And a pencil pusher, but not a good one, apparently.
No. The poor man was really just casing the joint. He didn't need pencil money because he had crook money.
Ooh.
And he wanted more. As it turns out, this man was George One Eye Dyer, a 46-year-old member of Montana's, pardon, I'm not sure if it's Havre or Havre. I'm going to say Havre.
Yeah, that's what I would guess, based
Havre
on spelling.
Gang. So named because they worked out of Havre, Montana. As best I could tell, Dyer had two eyes, but one might have been fake. There is a newspaper photo, and it looks like one eye is looking off in another direction, but...
So he's either wall-eyed or he had a glass eye?
Yeah. Or the photo was just bad.
Well, it was back then.
Yeah. Early 20s.
Yeah.
But he was called One Eye for some reason that I couldn't find, so I assume he just had a wonky eye.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like he had the wall eye that, we don't know where it's looking.
Poor guy. Dyer was known to use the pencil pusher ruse to scope out particular banks' security, or lack thereof, because this is a rural Montana in the early 20s. Check out the entrances, exits, and figure out the vault location. Now, unlike other famed bank robbers of the era, Dyer and the Havre Gang kept a low profile. They would choose small-town banks, like I said, rural Montana, Washington, Idaho, and even Canada. And after Dyer would check the place out, they would return under cover of night, break in, and take the unguarded money, while taking a little extra care to snatch up some government bonds, which they later sold off to some interesting buyers we'll talk about in a bit. During their active years, they hit 23 different banks in Montana alone, even going back to rob a couple of them a second time, which is really insulting.
Well, insulting and brazen and kind of stupid. Once.
Yeah.
I mean...
You think after the first time they would hire a night watchman, but I didn't see anything that, they were almost caught. They were just smooth.
If he had a wonky eye, he better have covered that up somehow.
It makes him very recognizable.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Especially when some of the other guys are going, hey, One Eye, should we take these bonds? So hopefully there was no one within earshot. The Havre Gang was evidently quite well connected to public officials and powerful characters in Montana. One Eye Dyer had a criminal career, and by 1914 he'd been arrested for robbery, which netted him a 19-year prison sentence. But as he was being transferred to the county jail, from the county jail to the state prison in Deer Lodge, Dyer managed to just vanish from the transport train. Train left, and he never arrived on it. He wasn't caught until 1920, 6 years as a fugitive. Yeah, so he had a good run, just not going to prison. But after he was caught in 1920, he still had to serve that 19-year sentence, and his best hope was to be paroled in 1925. But after his time on the run, parole would be unlikely.
Right.
So you would think. But for some reason, the state governor commuted Dyer's sentence, resulting in his release in June of 1923.
What?
Yeah, so he's out even earlier.
Yeah.
After being on the run for 6 years.
What is that?
He didn't even have to try for parole. Weird, huh?
Yeah. He must have deep pockets.
Yeah. So Dyer didn't waste any time getting back to work with the old gang. But what he didn't know was just before his release, one of the other gang members, another kind of leader in the gang, Arthur Chicago Freddie Davis, made a critical error during a bank job that April. And you'll hear all about that slip-up after a word from Taction USA. Taction USA is your go-to source for crime scene and evidence collection supplies. Taction USA offers quality products all designed and tested by active duty first responders and investigators. With no minimum order, you can order as much or as little as you need. Ordering is fast with no hassle attached. Check out TactionUSA.com today and find the quality and quantity you need when it comes to crime scene and evidence collection supplies. That's TactionUSA.com, or look for the link in our show notes and Facebook posts. When Chicago Freddy and the rest of the gang blasted the vault open at the First National Bank branch in Valier, he dropped his car keys. Amateur. Given the Havre Gang's connections, this piece of evidence may not have gone anywhere, but by 1923, the bankers were fed up with the robbers getting away with it or getting nothing more than a slap on the wrist.
No kidding.
Kind of like a 19-year sentence plus 6 years on the run got him less than 3 years for Dyer. Well, taking matters into their own hands, the Montana Bankers Association hired the Burns Detective Agency. This agency was notoriously efficient in completing the jobs they were hired to do, which, unfortunately, up to this point, included violently breaking up unions, and I do mean violently. And in just a few years, they would be the detective agency responsible for following the jurors in the Teapot Dome scandal trial, which resulted in a mistrial and the conviction of the company founder William J. Burns. Fun fact, his conviction and 1-year sentence was later overturned. Oh, the 20s.
No justice, man.
By the time One Eye was back in the game, the Burns detectives were coming after the gang hard. Those dropped car keys were traced back to Chicago Freddy's car, which is impressive that they were able to do that in 1923.
I was going to say, that's pretty impressive, because that's something people don't think about doing nowadays, let alone back then.
Right. And it may be a case of, rural area, not...
They knew,
like, well, it's a Dodge, and there's only 6
2
of those in town.
Yeah, that very well may be.
It may have just been a little bit of legwork, but still, impressive that they narrowed
thought
it down
about
to, whose car is this? Chicago Freddy. Yeah. I wonder if he's a bank robber with a name like that. So from there, they knew they had to find Freddy, and they searched for properties that he owned. They raided a garage that Freddy owned in Butte, Montana, but he and the gang had already abandoned that as the heat was closing in. Unlike Chicago Freddy, George Dyer was a little more careful. Rather than blow a vault door open with explosives and risk drawing attention, One Eye became skilled in the art of safe cracking. And on November 9th of 1923, just a few months out of prison, One Eye and a few other gang members finessed their way into a bank vault in Salesville, Montana. They made off with money and bonds worth around $5,000, which is more than $90,000 in modern money. This big score was a proud moment for the Havre Gang, but by the end of the month, they probably wished they could take this one back. On November 28th, Chicago Freddy's new home was raided by law enforcement thanks to information gathered by the Burns Agency, resulting in several gang members being arrested, including Freddy's wife and Henry Loranger, the former sheriff of Hill County, Montana. Another sheriff.
Right. I guess we have a theme this month.
Yeah.
In it, we didn't do that on purpose either. It just happened to be...
Crooked sheriffs and the Chicago mobster ends up kind of being the undoing of the protagonist. Totally coincidental.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a sign. Don't hang out with Chicago mobsters or corrupt sheriffs.
Yeah, and be a better person.
Yeah. That's what we're trying to tell you.
Yeah.
Several thousands of dollars in bond certificates were located inside the home, but Freddy and One Eye Dyer were nowhere to be found. The search expanded across the U.S., but with the relentless Burns Agency on the case, the rest of the Havre Gang was on borrowed time. In short order, the private detectives led law enforcement in Salt Lake City, Utah, to a Havre Gang hideout. Staying in the hideout was old One Eye himself, as well as a handful of other gang members, plus a teenage girl, and we can only speculate on why she was there.
Yikes.
As the Havre Gang puzzle's pieces fell into place, Chicago Freddy continued to flee west, and perhaps it was good detective work, or perhaps some of the other gangsters were displeased about the car key mishap and had loose lips.
Yeah.
Freddy was arrested in Stockton, California in no time. Really about a week after everyone else had been got. So he didn't have a big, valiant, on-the-run shootout. None of that. They just snagged him later. And as the Havre Gang toppled, so did their powerful connections. As I mentioned before, many of the stolen bonds were sold to interesting buyers. Mm-hmm. Well, as those bonds were tracked down, detectives learned that among the purchasers were a state legislator, 2 sheriffs, business owners, and various otherwise respectable people.
Such a shame.
26 people were arrested in connection to the Havre Gang's robbery and bond-selling scheme, with all those respectable people charged with receiving stolen property. Mm-hmm. So they must have been able to prove these folks knew better that these shady characters selling bonds out of the trunk of a car weren't legitimate representatives of a bank.
Wow.
Yeah. So a whole bunch of people got, and I'm sure short sentences and small fines and all that.
Yeah, but at least
given the era,
but their names were probably dragged through the mud. So good.
Yeah, it left a huge crack in the public service. During the gang's run, they managed to make off with the equivalent of $2 million today's money. George One Eye Dyer received a 15-year sentence, and Arthur Chicago Freddy Davis received 30 years.
Wow.
By the time either man would be eligible for parole, the Great Depression had devastated the nation, and banks all over the country were folding, especially in small towns. Mm-hmm. So even if the Havre Gang was able to get back together after their prison time, there just wasn't any more rural banks left for them to rob.
Good.
So time was
their banks, but yeah.
Good for the Depression.
No, but at least it didn't cultivate their hobby.
Right. If they wanted to do something stupid, they would have to go to a major city that by that point, probably didn't have any money in the vault because it was the Depression, and 2, had security available more than they would have to deal with in little bank in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. We both had this month stories that were similar in some regard.
Yeah. Crooked sheriffs and don't trust the guy from Chicago.
Right.
He's going to blow it.
Huh.
Yeah. A weird theme for Septemberoberries.
Oh, he did it again.
We thank you for joining us for these fun stories this month. And I'm sure next month, probably more people die. Well,
it is October, so we probably should fit with, something a little darker.
Yeah, we'll have to get a little creepy next month.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we thank you for joining us. We ask that you sign the crime scene log on your way out.
Stay safe.
And so long.
Fall is just around the corner, and with the drop in temperatures, you also need some new gear. 511 Tactical has a variety of great products from boots to pants to shirts and accessories. There are 2 standout products I had the chance to try out. One is the women's Sully UV hoodie. It's a long-sleeved, athletic-type shirt that's comfortable, light, but protective. It comes in black or white, and it's made out of polyester and is moisture-wicking as well. The other standout item this year that's new is the Chukka boot. These boots come in classic brown and have excellent traction. They're durable, comfortable, and look great for everyday wear, but are rugged enough to wear while hiking, or they could even be worn as an undercover boot. It's another great pair of footwear from 511.